Is there a place and time where logic breaks down and wonderment begins? Could that be somewhere or sometime along an infinite line between the reasonable and the highly unlikely? Join us on a journey into the improbable. Makeshift Stories presents Episode 295, Robin Hood Mode, read by Steve Peterson. Opening and closing theme by Matthew Erdman. Somewhere and sometime, a directive to do only good might be carried out in an unexpected criminal manner.
The water taxi bulldozed through the chop, sending spray onto the front window as the unwieldy little craft cruised past the remnants of roofs, chimneys, and billboards that had managed to endure the invading ocean. The water was only 2 to 3 meters deep here, so the taxis tended to follow the old number 4 road through the flood. "How long, Lindy?" I asked over the chug of the diesel. The pilot, Lindy, a friend of a friend, was paying off a debt by ferrying me down to White Rock. She stood on a small platform in the center of the taxi, hands on a miniature ship's wheel, her head protruding out above the passenger cabin, like an attendant steering a theme park ride, adding to the already awkward appearance of the little craft. Water taxis, at least to me, were more miniature tugboats, a toy for tourists than serious transport. But hey, it was free, and was getting me where I needed to be. "Another 40 minutes. Don't worry, you'll make your appointment." I couldn't complain. The water taxi meant I didn't have to pay for the bus, which ran along the top of the new seawall where the 91 used to be. It also meant I wasn't packed in like a sardine, with all the gardeners and domestics on their way to 12-hour shifts in the White Rock Enclave. It was a gorgeous morning, with a rare appearance of the sun. The sun, the greasy smell of biodiesel, the rhythmic chug of the ancient engine, and too many late-night gigs combined to lull me to sleep. Thump, thump. I woke. "We're there," Lindy announced, revving the motor to pin the taxi against the pier before she jumped out to tie the tub up. "I'll be waiting for a paying fare," she warned, "and if you're not back when I get one, you're on your own for the return." I hopped out, thanked Linda, and headed off to my meeting as fast as my 70-year-old legs could take me. Vicky was waiting near the White Rock Marina checkpoint around a corner from the guard station, and wasn't what I had expected. Medium-length, dark hair, probably dyed to cover her gray and slightly stooped, dressed not to stand out in expensive but intentionally non-flashy activewear. She didn't seem like an 80-year-old super-rich family matriarch. I had told her I'd be wearing my Vancouver 2010 t-shirt. Outside museum displays, there aren't many in the wild these days, so I figured it would make me easy to spot. "Mr. Lee?" she waved. "Vicky?" "Yes, thanks for coming down here." Vicky steered us away from the guard station. "I don't want this meeting to be accidentally recorded by a checkpoint camera. My family thinks I'm on a walk outside the seawall to take in the ocean air." She picked up the pace. "You see, I made a lot of money in my day, Mr. Lee, but I still remember what it's like to be hungry, and I want to give back to the less fortunate before I leave this world. However, my kids are afraid I'm giving away their inheritance. I guess I spoiled them. They want to keep my entire estate for themselves. They're watching me, trying to stop me from giving money away. So I need you to act on my behalf. It's an important role. That's why I'm paying so well. Here." Vicky reached into her bag and produced a burner handheld and a small envelope. "Go to a public space, maybe a park or a playground. It makes it harder for my family to track. There's instructions and passwords in the envelope. Use the burner to connect to the bank and transfer funds to the listed accounts. They're charities. Then dump the burner in the trash. It's only good for one connection anyway. Let me know through the gig app that you've completed the job, and I'll transfer your fee. If all goes well, there'll be more gigs like this to follow." Vicky looked around, quickly pushing the envelope and burner into my hands. I fumbled them into a pocket, But when I looked up, the woman was gone. She had literally disappeared. I swiveled toward the checkpoint, expecting to see her passing through it. She wasn't there or anywhere. That's weird, I muttered, but didn't really care. It was one of the best paying gigs I had ever landed. Easy work, and I'd take the old rich lady's money any day. If her gigs kept going, I'd soon be able to afford a container on my own, one above deck with a window. I'll make sure Ethan knows you followed through and your debt is paid, I assured Lindy as she cast off and headed over to the more lucrative run between Kerrisdale and Airport Island. Decades ago, the Cascadian Governing Council gave up plugging the holes in the Richmond seawalls, giving the river delta back to the rising ocean, creating the flood. Instead, they focused their battle on Airport Island, seeing overseas air links as more critical than sprawling suburbs. Instead of wasting money on transit to get to a park, I picked a bench at the end of Kerr Street by the seawall, sat down and pulled out the burner. The bench afforded a view of the old Fraser River channel, marked by the skeletons of industrial buildings, and beyond that the flood, dotted with the rusting hulks of converted container ships, which we tenants call the stacks. The old freighters had been run aground as part of the city's desperate plan to house its population as available land sunk beneath the waves. I could just see mine, a Panamanian registered hauler, the Oslo Max, stacked to capacity with converted container apartments. Number 383, where I rented a bunk with 5 others, was below its deck. The handheld vibrated in my hand. I looked down. It had found a network and connected. I tore open the envelope and followed the instructions, pinging Vicky when I was finished. The payment was already in my account when I got off the water taxi at my stack. Excited by the positive balance in my account, I perused the rental listings before making my way into the bowels of the ship. The sky was the usual gunmetal gray, sucking the color out of the world when I ventured out onto the deck the following day. Cold drizzle immediately began accumulating on my jacket, so I automatically pulled up my collar, retracting my head like a turtle. "Mr. Noah Lee?" The voice made me jump. "Who wants to know?" I growled and went to push past a thin man in an all-weather blue jacket who had been leaning against the deck rail. "Me." He moved to block my way down the stairs, welded to the hall that led to the water taxi stand below. "If you're here to collect, I can save you the time. I've only got the clothes on my back and a rented rack in a container below deck." It wasn't entirely true since Vicky's payment, but I wouldn't admit that to a debt collector. "I'm not with collections. I'm a private detective," the stranger explained. Despite the cold, a dribble of sweat rolled down my back. Had I somehow messed up, and the old lady's family found out about me? I took a deep breath and tamped down my anxiety. "Good for you," I growled. "I'm off to scrounge for breakfast. Move, please, before I call stack security." The man didn't budge. He knew a stack like mine couldn't afford private security, and why would the tenants even bother? There was nothing to protect. "I haven't done anything illegal. Tell your employer to leave me alone, or I'll call the police." It was an empty threat, and we both knew it. The man pulled a clear plastic evidence bag from his coat pocket and dangled it in my face. "Recognize this?" I started to push past, but the man moved to block me. "It's a burner handheld with your DNA, and you used it to make some very questionable money transfers yesterday. I tracked it to a trash can not far from here. Got anything you'd like to say?" Okay, I sighed. I was doing a gig for this wealthy lady, all above board, you see. I don't take shady jobs. She gave that burner to me to transfer some money for her to a charity, because her family won't let her. If they hired you, you're too late, and if they got a problem with their mother donating money, take it up with her, not me. "It's the bank that has a problem with it, Mr. Lee. They're the ones who hired me. I could send this." The PI dangled the evidence bag in my face again. To the police. Or you could come to my office and we could discuss your gig. I haven't done anything wrong, I insisted with less confidence. The sweat running down my back had become a torrent. From your perspective, that might be true, but you're still involved. The man looked over my shoulder at the rusting hulk of the Oslo Max. You're not living high on the hog. Tell you what, you come to my office and I'll spring for breakfast, anything you want. My name is Will Cipher, Cipher Investigations. Will paid for an autocab to his East Vancouver office in one of those transitional neighborhoods where you could still find, but not afford to live, in the few old bones of the city that stubbornly continued to survive between the new growth of glass and metal. Cipher Investigations was in one of those bones, a low-rise commercial building on East 7th Ave, shadowed out by a forest of high-rises. Will had a modest office condo that also served as his apartment. I was a gig worker from the flood, but Will wasn't living that much higher on the hog than me. Before getting to business, he let me finish a stack of takeout waffles, smothered in melted butter and sugary maple-flavored syrup. It was the best meal I had eaten recently. Mr. Lee, can I call you Noah? I nodded. Okay, Noah, I know you don't think you've done anything criminal, but you're caught up in something big. About 2 months ago, the bank, my client, started noticing a lot of transfers from accounts with balances over $1 billion. All on the surface legitimate, and all done through online transactions using the correct account and authentication information. Where'd the money go? I asked between the last crumbs of my waffles. Charities. Every transfer went to a different one. The bank told the recipients their sudden windfalls were from anonymous donors, and asked them not to acknowledge the gifts publicly. If it ever got out that someone has been moving funds around without the account owner's permission, they'd lose all their big customers, I concluded. Right. They hired me to find out who is doing this and stop them discreetly. I was a software developer before AI took over that field, so I know my way around online systems. I wrote a program to flag large bank transfers to see where they were being initiated from. And do you know what I found? No, I said, but suspected I wouldn't like what Will was about to say. All the suspicious transfers were initiated from handhelds in public spaces. I went to every location, but until yesterday, no joy. Then I lucked out and found that burner in a trash can at the end of Kerr Street. It was easy to match the DNA on it to your profile. I couldn't deny my involvement, so I told the man everything. How I had found the gig on a job app, then met the old woman, Vicky Martin, down at White Rock, and how she claimed to be giving away her millions against her family's wishes. I thought I was helping her, I explained. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Will typed away at his computer before answering. No, there isn't, except Vicky Martin died of old age 10 years ago, and the money you transferred isn't from her estate. It's from an offshore real estate mogul. The implications sunk in. I didn't know. You gotta believe me. I was just doing a gig. Will leaned back in his chair. As long as you help me catch whoever is behind this, no one has to know you're involved. Hi, Noah. Are you willing to help me again? The message asked. Meet me at the east gate to the Shaughnessy Enclave. My family has been watching my movements, so I'm temporarily living in a small place up here. That was how I found myself on a morning bus out to the Enclave, this time packed in with workers on their way to clean, garden, and cook. Will was somewhere on the bus, too. I tried looking for him, but failed. He said the less I knew, the easier it was for me to play my part. I got off a stop early. I don't have an Enclave work visa, and walked to the spot we had agreed to meet outside the security fence that ran down Oak Street just south of the King Edward Avenue security gate. Vicky, dressed as if she had come from a round of golf on one of the Enclave's exclusive courses, was standing against the fence on the west side of the street. She let 2 cars pass, then crossed to meet me. "Thanks for coming, Mr. Lee." She looked around, checked both sides of the street, and waited while a group of workers made their way to the Enclave security gate. After they were well past us, she dug into her handbag, producing another envelope and burner. "Put them in your pocket before someone sees them," she urged. "My family's spies are everywhere." "No problem," I said, taking the hand-held and envelope, using the opportunity to accidentally brush the back of her hand, as Will had shown me. Attracted by the sweat on her skin, the micro-transmitter on my shirt cuff jumped to her bare arm, gluing itself down, disguised as a new freckle. "This one is time-sensitive. You need to make the transfer as soon as you're alone." Vicky gave me a curt smile. "Remember, do it as soon as possible." She turned and headed back across the street. I wanted to watch where she was going, but Will had warned me not to follow her. Instead, I walked back to the bus stop to wait. "You did great, Noah." Will walked out from behind a neatly trimmed boxwood hedge. My heart jumped. "You were watching?" "Yeah, saw the whole thing. She didn't notice the bug, and she's not headed back to the Enclave." Will unfolded a tablet and brought up a map. We watched as a little dot made its way east from the security fence. After a few blocks, it stopped at a street corner, waited, then suddenly sped south. "She's taken an auto cab," Will explained. The cab wound its way through the streets of South Canby and then suddenly stopped. The map automatically zoomed in, and a label appeared: formal and casual wear. "It's a clothing rental place," Will noted. The dot stayed at the shop for about 5 minutes before moving down the street at walking speed. It paused again, then sped off. "Another cab, and that route only leads to one place." "The flood!" I gasped, looking over Will's shoulder. "But why would a rich person head to the flood?" "She's not Vicky Martin," Will reminded. "She suspects something, doesn't she? And she's going there to check me out?" "Don't think so," Will said, hailing a ride. "But we're going to follow her and find out what's going on." We tracked Vicky, or whatever her name was, to a container stack on a freighter called the Outback Ocean. It was one of the more recent ships run aground on the Richmond mudflats about a kilometer oceanward from my stack. But the old giant was showing its age. Rust was everywhere on its superstructure, a sign the residents didn't have enough money for essential maintenance. We jumped out of the autocab and watched from a water taxi dock as the dot descended into the guts of the ancient ship. "What do we do now?" I asked. "Wait." "Wait?" "Yes, wait. I'm not the police. I just can't break into someone's container. We take the next water taxi out and wait for the woman to come up on deck." We had been waiting for several hours when a few LEDs haphazardly glued to the rails and a couple of makeshift lamp posts flickered to life, casting little blue pools of brightness in the growing shadows. Finally, the stairs lashed to scaffolding, extending up and down the stacks of containers, began to rattle under the weight of someone climbing up from below. Will motioned for me to move into the shadows. Now dressed in baggy, threadbare dollar store sweats, the woman heaved herself tiredly up the steep stairs. Without a wig, her hair was sheared short and primarily gray. The neatly coiffed, well-to-do aging brunette had become an 80-year-old house cleaner who had only seen the inside of an enclave from the end of a broom. Head bowed, she didn't immediately see Will. "Vicky Martin?" Will asked, offering to help the woman with the last step. Alarmed, she looked up, almost losing her balance. "Vicky?" she growled. "There's no one named Vicky on this rust bucket. What do you want?" Will motioned for me to step out from the shadows, and the woman's face drained of color. I don't know anything about this Vicky person," she claimed, despite obviously recognizing me. "Maybe this will jog your memory." Will pulled out another evidence bag containing the envelope and the burner. "I bet if I run the DNA on this, Yours will show up, and if we open that envelope, it'll contain bank account numbers and passwords, and judging from this place, they won't be yours. I also have a video of you giving this to Noah here." Her eyes grew wide. She glared at me. "You didn't do the transfers." I shook my head. "You were supposed to do them right away." The old woman began to knead her hands and look around. "He said they had to be done before the end of the day or something bad would happen. Why didn't you just do what I told you?" she yelled, and tried to push past Will, who grabbed her arm. "Who are you talking about?" Will demanded. The woman's eyes were wild. "He said there would be consequences." She tried to pull away. "What consequences? If you don't tell me, I'll turn these," Will jiggled the evidence bag, "over to the police." I... The woman broke down and began to cry. "I needed the money, and the gig was simple. Play a rich woman trying to give away her fortune behind her family's back. He made all the arrangements, rented my costumes, paid for the auto cabs, and recruited the marks to do the transfers. It was supposed to be easy and no risk. I knew it was probably a scam, but the money was too good to turn down. I just showed up, played my role, and handed the mark a burner and account information. But this last drop was different. It had a time limit and a warning. You didn't go through with it. Idiot!" She glared at me. "Something bad's going to happen now," she moaned. Big tears began to roll down the woman's cheeks. "Nothing's going to happen," Will assured. "I can protect you if you tell me who hired you." Vicky laughed. "Against Jetton? Jetton Hill, he's got eyes and ears everywhere. There's no hiding from him." The lights went out in the entire ship, plunging us into darkness. Deep within the old freighter, giant diesel engines tried to groan to life, shaking the whole structure. "It's him!" the woman cried. "He knows we didn't follow his orders." To be continued.
You can help us create original content twice a month by heading over to ko-fi.com/makeshiftstories and making a one-time donation, or becoming an ongoing supporter at patreon.com/makeshiftstories. And if you can, please leave us a review or rating wherever you're listening to the podcast. It helps new listeners discover us. If you'd like to connect with us, please email makeshiftstories@gmail.com or visit our website at makeshiftstories.com. We release Makeshift Stories around the beginning and middle of the month. This month's story was written by Alan V. Hare and read by Steve Peterson. Opening and closing themes were composed and recorded by Matthew Erdman. Audio production and editing by Vicada Studios. Makeshift Stories is released under a Creative Commons non-commercial, attribution, no derivative license.